Welcome back. As you can see, we've got quite the changes here. We got a new piece of artwork, if you want to call it that, in the back, and we got a new troublemaker that's going to be making some noise here. This is Cameron, the newest addition. She's not too crazy about me filming just yet. I think maybe some separation anxiety or whatever it may be. But hopefully she's going to do alright here once I set her down. But her and the old black dog, they're going to be making plenty of noise in the videos to ensue, I'm sure. But we're going to go ahead and get her down. Hopefully she's not too awful noisy here. She doesn't, like I said, doesn't like to be away too awful much. But hopefully Big Sister takes care of her here while we're filming. Hey, no biting that. Cam. Good girl. Never a dull moment. Anyhow, today we're going to revisit the Wasted White Girl. And I did this one, it's probably going on 2 years now. I did this one at the old place. The lighting was absolutely terrible. I changed a few things up since then. And we're just going to do a revisitation to this pattern. And we'll see how this one goes. And update you guys on what's new on this one. I tweaked a few things. Overall, I mean, not huge changes, just a few things that I saw that could use some improvements and that make the fly swim just a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and get right into this one. To start, I'm going to go, I know when I originally did it, it was a Daiichi 2461 that I used for the front hook, and I think it was a, I'd have to check the notes, I think it was a size 1, may have been a size 2, I can't remember, but this one's going to be a Gami. Let me tighten that up just slightly. This is a Gami B10S, this is a size 1, and I'm just going to go ahead and bend this one right now before we get into any of the other portions of this pattern. Where are we at here? I just rearranged everything and I can't find, damn it, so there's that. Stand by. I'll be right back. I need to find something to bend this with. And make sure the dog's not making a mess. What's up, Knoxville? Hey, buddy. Alright, I got the Leatherman sitting here. Usually it's sitting right on the bench or back, minus a little bit of a delay. Much as you think you're prepared, you never really can be, so. Alright, if you've watched the bending hooks video, there's nothing new here, but I'm just heating this up a little bit. I'm going to take this at probably a 20-degree bend toward the camera. There we go, and then I'm going to bend it slightly down, maybe 5 degrees. Something about like that is what we're after. And you can see there's that neat little bend on this, and then when we trim the deer hair, it's going to be trimmed against or with that bend, and then the outside's going to be rounded, and it gives a neat little diving effect to this, and it almost gives a horizontal plane rotation to the fly. We'll get to that one in a little bit. I'm going to jump to, let me have it here. I'm going to jump to the back hook, and this is a Daiichi 1850. This is a size 6. This is the full size, not the 390U. And I'll explain a little bit about this hook. MFC's coming out with these now in all sizes, so they should be hitting the market here pretty soon, if they're not out already. but instead of this ring eye being horizontal, it's a vertical, and you can see the ring right there. It just makes it easier when I tie this in, because I want this hook on I want it 90 degrees off from this one. So this is how this is going to sit in the vise, or this is how that fly is going to ride right here. This one's kicking toward the camera side, and then this one's in the traditional up and down. And the theory behind that being, when this fly rotates, as it does when it's fished properly, when this fly rotates, there's always going to be a hook pointing down. So when I give this thing a good jerk and it's sitting like this is going to kick this way, and then this back hook is going to be facing down how I typically like my hooks to be. So without anything further on this one, we're going to go ahead and start tying this fly. As always on the streamers, I've got the gel spun 100, and we're going to do this one in black and purple today. And there's another thing that I'm still missing on this. I am not prepared at all. Where are you at? This is what happens when you reorganize everything and stuff's out of where it typically is. You just get all over the place. So, enough of that, enough of me making excuses for filming a terrible video this week. I am just going to take my lumps on the comments and press on. So I'm going to take 2 Schlappen feathers in black. Get out of there. And I turn these against themselves. Opposite of how a typical deceiver style tail is, and then they wind up being like this. If I can get any more motion, if I can get any more chaos in the water, I choose to take it. And this, when the water hits it, they just flap back and forth and make a little bit more motion. So that's what I'm after. Now, as far as a measurement goes, I take this back, I take my material clip all the way back, and then I measure these tails out to where that material is going to be touching the eye that I have on there. And then I'm going to trim these off. Those are going out of the way. And I leave a little bit a tag on this, a little bit of a tag. That way when the material catches it, it just gives me a little bit more security, and I don't have to worry about doubling over stems or anything like that. It just makes things easier for me. And then I'll take my thread, just clean this up. Gives me a little bit of an extra grab that I'm after. And then you can see those tails, how they sit sideways like that, or they sit opposite of one another. And then when the water hits them, like I was saying, it just gives me a little bit more motion, a little bit more chaos while they're there. So I need to really stop saying that for a transition. What I'm going to take next is probably close to a dozen fibers, and this is just Hairline's Purple Haze, basically Flashabou is what it is. And I'm going to run this laterally down both sides, stopping just shy of the actual tail itself. And then I'll clean this up, move these off to the side. And I'm going to take it down, or not take them off to the side, I'm just going to move these to where it's catching that other tail laterally. You can see we have a nice little bit of flash there, everything's pretty clean. And we're going to move on to our craft fur. I think both the girls are taking a sleep right now, which is pretty nice. Pretty nice there. Not interrupting the video. We'll see if that lasts. So I'm going to take this craft fur here and just clean things up a little bit. Get everything nice and organized. There we go. Run it through the brush, and then I'll trim this off nice and flush. I'm going to kick this to the side, and it really doesn't make a difference because this one's just black and purple. If I'm doing like a two-tone, like a rainbow or something, the portion, I'll have the dark portion on this side to where the hook is facing you guys. With this one, like I said, it really doesn't matter too awful much because it is just all black and purple, and I don't have two different colors that I'm using on the craft fur. So I'll just go ahead and get this tied in. I'll cut this back in an angle. Try not to get any of my flash in there. And I'll just clean this up. Make a couple of good wraps. That looks pretty good. Now, oh, there's one. The other's sure to follow. Here's my second. I'm going to take another stack of craft fur in black. And when I tie these production style, I have everything up in the... this stuff's already pre-prepped and everything, so I mean it's going to take me a little bit longer to get through this one than it typically would, but that's alright. I don't mind as long as you guys don't. It may take half hour, 45 minutes to get this video done, so would have been less time if I had everything properly organized, but it's been a little chaotic around here lately. A little chaotic. So next up, I'm just going to fold this back over itself, and this craft fur is going to run into my tail and flash section. Got that little bit of purple going back there. Now I'm going to take some UV Polar in purple. And when I did this one originally, I did the whole Schlappen and ice dub combination, kind of like a dungeon or a boogeyman. This one gives me a little bit more reflective value, and two, it's quicker. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's many flies that I tie out there, maybe outside of the rainbow riffle, that that doesn't use this UV Polar. I'm addicted to this stuff. I mean, it's just such a versatile material, and I like the internal flash that you get from it. So I'm just going to run this purple up to the front here every fourth or fifth wrap. Just take some time, clean your fibers up a little bit, and then stretch your material. Leave a little bit of room here because we're going to tie in some black woolly bugger Marabou for overwings. Clean that stuff up really good. Same thing, I'm going to kick this off to the side, and it's going to run, my overwings are going to follow the path that my craft fur and my tails are following. So we're going to take this woolly bugger Marabou. I like using this stuff a lot for overwings. You don't have to sort through a whole ounce of Marabou or whatever you buy your Marabou in. This stuff's just a lot thicker, it has a lot more bulk to it than your blood quills do. And like I said, I don't have to search forever to find it, so I just go with these, and then I'm going to take this top section here, just like when I sort Marabou for my tails, I'm using just the tips, and then the rest of this is going to go in for dubbing brushes for Octobers and so on and so forth. landing strips, Brazilians, whatever it may be. Wet my fingers here. And I'm taking this Marabou back to where it lays just past my tie-in point for the craft fur. And it gives me a nice seamless transition. It gives me a little bit of extra flutter. And it also makes this UV polar a little bit more of an internal flash than it would be if I kept it a little bit shorter. And it just stands out, or it makes that internal flash pop a little bit more, and it's not so much in your face to where if you left it unexposed, it would just be too much, in my opinion. So, there we go again. Measure that Marabou out to where it's the same as what's on the other side. Go ahead and get that nice and secure. And then we'll tie this off, trim this section, and our back hook is done. Go ahead and whip finish. And then the last thing that I'll do is color up this section. When you know I'm actually prepared, I have a black marker. I'll just color up my white thread, touch that with a black marker a little bit, and then everything disappears as far as the white thread's concerned. Where is my connection wire? I got razor blades. Like I said, I'm all out of sorts here. I've got stuff just all over the place. Here we go, 19 strand Beadalon. Yep, 38 thousandths. I'm just going to take a little section of this. I'm going to cut this off. Grab 2 beads. Carried away on the connection wire here. A little long, but I'm trying to rush through it and not spend a ton of time measuring stuff out. Had I done it beforehand, I noticed a theme in this so far. Had I done this beforehand, I would have cut the length of this video down a lot. But no putting the toothpaste back in the tube now, is there? Phone's going off. It's not the work phone, so we're good. I'm smart and silenced both of them this time. Alright, so moving up on this one, we're going to go with the gel spun. Same thing, I'm going to tie this in. This is one of the changes that I made to this. We're on the Gami. It's just a little bit wider of a hook gap. It's not as long, so you have to lengthen the size of the hook out a little bit. The 1/0s are a little bit tough to bend, but you can still do it. The 1s bend pretty nice for you. Now, the hook on this back one, like I said, is going to be offset at a 90. It's facing the camera. So make sure that you get your wire here, they're running parallel. Even, just spread the beads out, make sure that they're parallel. And then we're going to set this in on my side here. And I'm just going to get this tied in, making sure that my hook is going to stay riding at a 90. And adjust the length of your connection. I want it just slightly shorter. I keep changing this up. Sometimes I think I get more motion with less distance between. Sometimes I think I get more motion with more. I'm going a little bit less than the width of my 2 beads for the overall loop in my connection wire. And I'm going to go ahead and get this out of my way. I'm going to flip these back around, stopping just short of where I bent the front hook. That way I have a good reference point to where I want to start my deer hair, to where all of the rest of that work is going to take place. Now we'll get some junk scissors here, go ahead and cut this connection wire because I made it too long. Stop this right at the hook point or between the hook point and the barb. I'm going to go right behind the point of the hook and then advance forward just slightly. I'm going to go back to another stack of craft fur on the top and bottom. Clean this up in the comb. I'm going to need a little bit more actually. I'm a little on the sparse side there. I'm just about at the end of this pack, so just about on the end of it. Alright, so get everything cleaned up. I'm going to get the majority of the bulk, line my tips up just slightly, and then I'm going to measure this out. I want this measurement being, when I set this on the hook at my tie-in point, the measurement is going to be to where I reach the end of the marabou tips, knowing that I'm going to tie it in reverse and then fold it over, so I'm going to wind up just short of that. But it gives a nice clean skirt and it covers up your connection points. So having that measured out, we're going to go ahead and tie this in. On the top, advance a little bit forward and then come right back to the point of this hook, cut down at an angle, and you can see you have those butt ends are just following along with the bend of that hook. Now I'm going to take another section of this, equally as thick, clean everything up. Same thing, I'm going to even my tips up. And I'm not worried about measuring this one out, I'm just going to cut it where I think it needs to be. I'm going to turn this around and then line it up with what I already have existing there. So now that that is in place, before I tie this in, I'm just going to loosen my fingers up a little bit and I'm going to work those fibers around to where they catch that top tie-in portion. I'm going to move everything forward here. And then same thing, just cut this in an angle. If there's a couple of fibers sitting there, no worries. It's all going to get covered up by this skirt here. Fold everything back, and then we're going to come right to the point of this hook, tie this in, and then advance it forward right in front, and that's where we're going to tie in this UV puller. The UV puller, same thing. We're just going to tie this in and work it right to the front before we put our marabou in. There's going to be a little bit of a bump here, just inherently by tying these in reverse, but nothing really to worry about. If you want to, when you're spinning this, you're going to come off of this bump a little bit, and there you can see it. If you want to ease that transition a little, you can go back over top and smooth it out. I think it's a waste of material. In my opinion, it's a waste of 2 wraps. But you can if you want. I don't find it necessary at all. We're going to have these over and under wings covering everything, and this purple is just barely going to be visible. So you're definitely not going to notice that bump a ton. But if you want to, go ahead and go over top of it and it'll clean your fly up slightly on the body. Now I'm just going to peel all these fibers back. I'm just working right over top of my bend right now. My bend starts right about here. I'm going to tie my Marabou in right at the end of the UV puller. Get that stuff out of the way. Get this Marabou over top. And wet those fibers slightly. I want this Marabou going 3/4 of the way back my craft fur. Get that tied in and secure. Lift this up. Get that out of there, and then same thing on the bottom. I'm going to measure this one out, make sure that I have the same length, flip my hook around, and get this tied in on the bottom section. And now we're about to get into the fun part. We're going to tie a two-toned deer hair head, and you can see just looking at this as I peel these fibers back, that purple just barely comes through on the side. So when this thing does its lateral dive or its horizontal dive down to the side, that's when that purple is really going to shine through, and you're going to catch that little bit of extra flash that you want out of this. So now we're working on a downhill slope and a cut toward the camera side, so it's a little difficult to get used to tying on this, but once you get a couple dozen in you, it's pretty simple, really. Alright, so I switched over to a 200 gel spun. I like working with this 200. If you've watched any of the videos previously, I like working with this 200 a lot more, just because it flares your fibers out some more so than what the 100 does. And the 100, if you get really heavy-handed, will have a tendency to cut right through these fibers. So I go with the 200, and it just gives me a little bit more control. It makes the deer hair flare out a little bit more. So what I'm going to do here now is work with just my collar section. This is just black belly hair. I'm going to do this a two-tone black and purple. And get some Marabou so this isn't so loud. Get those nice and stacked. Everything's nice and even. And then I'm going to measure this out to where I'm going to go back to the hook point on this front hook. Get everything measured out. This is a fairly beefy collar, as always when I work with these. So I'm going to measure this out, and my tips are coming between the hook point and the barb of the hook on this. So I'm going to take this out of the vise, and I'm just going to give that a nice square cut. Spin your deer hair, or spin your thread, and then we're going to tie this in, and this is going to be our collar portion here. Give that a nice push down, that way it's going to give you that half moon effect that you're after on your deer hair. And then I'm going to advance right in front of that little bump that I have there. So you can see there's that collar. Everything kind of blends together because it's all black. There's no really color breakup or anything, but that'll change here in a second once we get this purple tied in. So when you're doing the two-tone materials, one thing, or your two-toned head, one thing that I've found that makes this easier is if you start on your bottom color first. It gives you visually on top, you're able to see and make sure that your colors aren't bleeding into one another. Not that it would matter one bit whatsoever if they do, but it makes a lot cleaner of a look on the fly when the colors don't bleed into one another. So In order to do that, like I said, I found it's easier if you start on the bottom, find your center point of your hollow fibers, and make sure that you just follow the bend of this hook. Go 1, 2 wraps, get a third, and I really cinch down on these. This is where using that 200 really comes into play instead of the 100. The 100 probably would have cut a few of these fibers by now, if not all of them. So now you can see on this top section I have a nice clean work area to put this black deer hair in, and it's going to make a nice clean break for the head of this fly. I probably have too much material here, but I'll clean this up a little bit. I'm going to inherently lose a few strands as I clean this up in the comb. Go ahead and cut the tips off on this. Now same thing, I'm just going to set this right on top. I'm following the bend of this hook, and I'm making sure that my thread's not catching any of these purple fibers as I'm coming through here. I get 2 pretty secure wraps in. I get my third, and then I'm going to pull tight on this, and you can see everything flares out really nice, and I have this nice break between the 2. Now I'm going to stand these 2 up. I'm going to push these back. I'm not packing this material. I don't want it packed. I'm just going to stand these 2 up. I'm going to advance my thread right in front, and I'm going to leave it at the halfway point of what I have left as far as working room on that hook. Go ahead and get rid of that purple that was just sitting there. Now this purple's a little bit on the short side of what I like to work with, and it's not quite as hollow as what I want, but I don't have anything else, so this is what we're going to work with. I'm going to take these tips, I'm going to cut this off, and then I'm going to go right underneath. I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit so it grabs this deer hair. My ring finger and my thumb are going to peel everything back, and then they're also going to hold in this deer hair, this new stack that I'm tying in. Loose wrap, and that black wants to get in the way. Third wrap, I'm going to pull tight on this, and it's going to flare everything just how I want it. I'm still able to manipulate that bottom section because I didn't really sink it down as much as I could, because I know I still have 3 more solid wraps coming on top with this black deer hair. I'm going to take a little bit less material on this because my black is a little bit more user-friendly, so to speak. It's a little bit more hollow and it flares a little bit better for me, as you can see on that first stack that I did. So it does take up a little bit more bulk. And then I'm just going to use the same thread path that I used on that purple stack, keeping my thread nice and short here. I don't want to be working with a whole bunch of it to where I'm going to be catching stray purple fibers. And then I'm going to pull tight on this, and I'm going to have a nice clean break. I may have 1 or 2 fibers in there that will drive me nuts, but I'll be able to overlook. But for the most part, I'm going to have a nice clean break on this fly. Now you can see I have a nice clean head to work with. I'm just going to come forward here and tie this off. Go ahead and whip finish. I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit. I got a few short ones that don't want to cooperate. me see if I can get one more in there. Perfect. Now the next thing that we have up on this is we're going to trim this deer hair to allow it to swim how we want it to, or to make it swim how we want it to. Before we start trimming the deer hair, I'm just going to take an old comb here. I'm going to fluff this stuff out a little bit. That way it's a little bit easier to work with. Make sure I don't catch my marabou or my collar too much. And then I'm going to get a fresh razor blade and we're going to start trimming on this. The way I normally start these the way I normally trim these white girls is I go on the very front, and because it's bent and I'm still not at multiple camera angles yet, I'm probably, well, no, I'm not really in the way here. I just checked the monitor, but I'm just going to go right in the front here. Don't try and make this thing perfect on the very first cut. All you're wanting is the nice rounded section of the head, and then I'll spin it to my side and I'll trim the bottom section. I just want the overall shape of this pattern to start with, okay? That's insanely too much bulk, or entirely too much bulk, but I'll get to that as I fine-tune this. The next thing that I want to do here is just take my razor blade and I'm following the path of the bend on this hook. And I'm going to work this all the way to my marabou and to my collar. Now you can see on that there's that nice clean break between the black and the purple. Not that it really matters, because there's going to be an eye that's going to sit over top of that and cover everything up, but it makes me feel good knowing that there's a nice clean break underneath that eye. That's what we'll go with. I'm just OCD as hell. Before I start working on the back section of this, I'm just going to shape this section a little bit more. I'm going to push this razor blade through, going right up to my collar, and I'm shaping this back section, or I'm shaping the top section. Turn this around, I'm going to shape the bottom section. Now just be mindful that this thing is bent at almost a 30-degree angle, so don't trim it as you see the hook point. Make sure you come around and trim it to the bend of this hook. Now I'll just take this section here, just shape my side of the deer hair head as best I can. I'm not going to get too awful picky here because I'm going to put the eyes on, and then I'll get all of the fine-tuned trimming done after the fact before I take the picture. Yeah, so don't worry about that too much when I flip it around and you can see all these wild hairs all over the place. Now before I glue my eyes on, I'm just going to trim a flat spot right here where that eye is going to sit on my side of the head. Now I'm going to take some 3D, these are MFC 8mm eyes. I'm going to take these, if I can get them out of the package and cooperating. There we go. And then I'm going to take some gel super glue. This is Loctite. I'm going to get a little bit right there. I'm going to set this eye on. Make sure that that sets nice for me, and then I'll bring this on the inside here. And then glue this inside eye. we go. Everything looks pretty clean. And take that, and then I'm just going to take this right here. I'm going to burn a little bit of the deer hair away from the eye. That way it's nice and clean. I don't have to worry about it interfering with the eye of the hook or anything, and it's gonna, not like you would have to worry too much with the Gami. It's got the pretty exaggerated eye section on the hook. That's not going to be difficult to get your thread or anything in there, but it does clean the eye of the hook up, and it makes the head look a little cleaner when you burn that stuff off. So there it is again. So there is the updated video on the wasted white girl. The last thing that I'm going to do on this one, I got some lights in the frame there. The last thing that I'm going to do on this after I trim the rest of the material up and you know, clean this deer hair work and everything up is I'll take a little bit of Loon UV thin. I'll run over top of that, especially over the eyes and everything. I'll hit it with the torch and it'll be done. But you'll see all of that in the picture. I'm not going to take the time to do it right now. It'll just be really boring to watch me put UV on the head of the fly. But there it is. If you guys have any questions or comments, as always, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.